Chapter 14 New Guardian. It was a good send-off meal of barley cakes, cow meat, dried beans and honey ale. Katla lighted 5 white wax candles in his honour, though she had meant to give them to the church at Easter. Good pine logs crackled in the hearth, and that evening the steading was as warm as any home could be. There was a shaggy grey and white sheepdog called Nim, and though he had come to adore Starcad above all men, even Nim seemed sad that Bjorn was leaving. It was as though he had got the news by some secret way, as bees do when their keeper dies. He curled up in a far dim corner and whimpered to himself, a thing he never reckoned to do usually, but tonight was different for them all. Katla leaned across the board table gently and said, "You may not wish to call me mother, but you cannot stop me from thinking of you as my son, Bjorn, and I know that there is sadness in your heart, even though you try to hide it." Bjorn put on a smile. "If it pleases you, Katla," he answered, "I will call you mother for this last night." Truth to tell, he was glad she had spoken thus, and glad to call her mother. She smiled and helped him to more meat and ale. Then she said, "Your heart is heavy at the journey that lies before you, but you will find new courage as you fare forth into the world and conquer it, inch by inch. Not so many years ago, down among the Essex folk, there was a good old fighter named Bartwold, and when the Danish man came ashore at a place called Malden and killed Bartwold's lord after a hard fight, this old war man spoke up and said these words: 'Thought shall be the harder, heart the keener, courage the greater as our strength faileth. Here lies our leader, in the dust of his greatness, who leave him now damned for be forever. I, who am old now, will not leave this battle, but will lie at his feet in the dust with my leader.'" Then she stopped, as though she was a little ashamed, a mere woman speaking so, but her words had moved Bjorn, and he took her hand and said, "I understand, mother. You are telling me that a man must have courage at all times, whatever the odds. Is that it?" Katla rose from the board and put her hands to her face. "I do not know what I am trying to tell you, son," she said. "I think it was the honey ale talking, not me." As the 2 men looked up at her from the table, the night outside was suddenly cracked across with harsh, high cries. Then a horn blew as though the day of judgment had come, and a voice called loudly, "Open the gates, you within! Open them, or we shall break them down!" Starcad looked across at Bjorn's white face and said, "There is no need to ask what manner of men stand outside our stockade, son. You and I both know what such a greeting means." He hobbled to where his sword stood by the wall, then turned and said, "Will you give me leave to wear your horned helmet for the last time?" Bjorn nodded, his tongue silent, and the Jomsviking said, "It is strange that they did not light the beacon on the coast hill to warn us we might expect such visitors." Bjorn stared at him silently, and then took up his own short sword and went over to where Starcad stood, wrapping a sheepskin round his right arm in place of a shield. As the shouting grew louder outside, the Bearsark said to Katla, "At least we have fed well, wife, and good food is always worth 2 men. We count for 4, you see. Now Bjorn, if you are coming out with me to try a few of the tricks we've practiced these last days, then I must ask you to stand, as old Gork the Guardian did, at my back. So you will protect me there, and you will also be out of the way if I flail about me a little wildly, as I am well apt to do when the game gets hot. Will you be my guardian then?" Bjorn fell onto his knees before Starcad and took his left hand and pressed it to his lips. "Father," he said, "this is greater honour than when a chief gives a ring to his warrior for me to take Gork's place. If I never gain more fame than this, I shall go to the last resting home happy." But Katla had run into the corner where Nim the dog stood bristling, and put her rough apron over her head, weeping that she'd found a family at last only to lose it again. Starcad gave a dry cough or two, but did not go to her. Instead he turned to Bjorn and said, Come on then, son, and let us see what sort of weather is outside. It should be warming up a little at this time of the year." And so they went through the cottage door and shut it fast after them.